Hi, welcome to this video on Rust environment setup for Windows. My name is Doug Milford from Lambda Valley. There are a fair amount of steps to get set up, so I'll try to go slow and be thorough. Sometimes the most frustrating thing about learning a new language is getting set up. Hopefully I can ease that pain a bit. But get your hiking boots on, we're going for a trip. You have a variety of choices when picking a development environment. I personally like Visual Studio Code and will be using that throughout the course. It's lightweight, easy to use, has a variety of helpful extensions for Rust development, and best of all, free. And don't confuse Visual Studio Code with Visual Studio. Visual Studio Code is lighter weight and does not force alternative conventions onto your program, such as a proj file. If that doesn't quite make sense to you, don't worry. The main point is that I recommend you use Visual Studio Code, not Visual Studio. To get Visual Studio Code, you can go to code.visualstudio.com. Select the Download for Windows. That will download an executable and at the same time take you to this screen, which has some instructions and frequently asked questions. Once your download finishes, go ahead and run it. You may get a message regarding system level setup versus user setup. I'm currently doing user setup. If you want all users to have access to Visual Studio Code, follow their instructions. Make sure you read the license agreement. Get through the click-through screens and choose the settings that you like. Go ahead and launch Visual Studio Code once it's ready. I'm going to close down all windows so that you have a clean slate. They're just release notes and possibly a welcome screen. We'll need to get some extensions that will help us do Rust development. On the left-hand side, there is an icon that has 4 small boxes. If you open that up, it may give you some suggestions as to what you might want to install. Don't worry about that for now. The first item I want to get is the C++ extension. You might be saying, "Hey, I thought this video was about Rust. What gives?" Well, this extension will allow us to put breakpoints within our code. I'll talk more about it in the debugging module, but in essence, it will give us a much richer debugging experience. Go ahead and install it. Next, we'll need to search for Rust. You have multiple extensions to choose from. I use the Rust RLS extension. Go ahead and install it. You'll see this window pop up giving you a general description about what the extension does. In particular, I want to scroll to the Quick Start section. It will give you a link to rustup, which is a toolchain manager for Rust. We'll go to that link in just a second. The instructions also point to multiple ways to install this extension. We've already installed it via the Extensions Manager built into Visual Studio Code. No need to go to the marketplace or install it via the command line. The next 2 lines are about creating a new project. My Hello World video pretty much covers this, but if you'd like to see official documentation about a Hello World program, this link will take you there. The Rust documentation is a wonderful source of knowledge and explains things very clearly. I've used it extensively in my own learning. I also want to point out this last line here, because there can be some confusion. It says you'll be prompted to install the RLS. Once installed, the RLS should start building your project. What this means is that even though we've clicked install for this extension, or if you follow the other install recommendations, there's still a missing piece that will prompt you once you start using your Rust code. It'll pop up in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen when you create your first Rust file, and it'll say RLS is missing. Do you want to install it? I'm paraphrasing, but just be ready when you see that pop up and allow it to install RLS once it asks. I briefly touch upon this in the Hello World video. Okay, moving on. Click on the rustup link I mentioned earlier. This will take you to yet another download. Go ahead and download it and run it. I know, getting development environments up and running is a major pain these days. I feel ya, but we'll get through it. When you run the downloaded executable, a command line will pop up. Yeah, command lines have taken over the development world for good or ill. It's just a fact of life for developers these days. 20 years ago, I never would have guessed command lines would still be a thing, much less taking over the development world. In any case, go ahead and select option 1. We're going to be using the stable toolchain. For more bleeding edge features, you can use a nightly toolchain or a beta toolchain. For these videos, the stable toolchain is all we'll need. It will download and install multiple items. This is actually the Rust engine, so to speak, to build and run Rust programs. Alright, everything's been installed. Let's go ahead and double check. To do that, we need to restart Visual Studio Code. Again, I know this is a pain, but this is not Rust specific pain. It's generic development setup pain for most modern programming done today. Getting set up for most types of development has become an exercise in frustration. Consider it a way of weeding people out who don't really have the motivation to become a real programmer. Think of it as an entrance exam. Wink! Anyways, once you reopen Visual Studio Code, we'll need to open a new terminal. You can open a new one by going to your terminal menu option and selecting New Terminal. I'll be using the PowerShell type of terminal. If you prefer a different terminal, that's up to you. Type rustc-version, and that will give you the version of Rust you're running on. I'm using version 1.37.0. Yours is probably a later version depending on how long it's been since this video was created. If you get some type of error during this step, it indicates something went horribly wrong and you need to retrace your steps. You should also be able to do the same thing for cargo and rustup. When a new stable version of Rust comes along, you can use the command rustup update to get the latest version. Lastly, I want to make sure some of your settings are correct. In the bottom left-hand corner of Visual Studio Code, there will be an icon that looks like a gear. Go ahead and click on that and select the Settings option. Search for EOL, which stands for End of Line. The Rust RLS extension seems to have some hiccups when running on Windows machines, specifically how end of line is read within files created on Windows. At first, I had difficulty with IntelliSense working properly and such. To fix it, I had to change the EOL setting to \n in order for IntelliSense and other things to start working properly. Hopefully that's fixed relatively soon and I can remove this section from the video. Until then, set the EOL setting to \n. Now search for breakpoints. Check that setting so that in the future debugging module, we'll be able to set some breakpoints. Now search for format and set it to rustlang.rust. On there, we're going to check both the paste and the save. And now search for auto save with a space in between. We're going to set that to after delay. At this point, your environment should be set up and ready to go. In the next video, we'll do a quick hello world. Once again, my name is Doug Milford from Lambda Valley, and I look forward to doing some actual programming in the next video.